So let's take a look at Brazil. Over the last 3 years, um, the mobile devices um, in Brazil have become more and more popular, at least for browsing. I think they were always popular, but the shift uh, from a desktop for browsing to a smartphone for browsing has been pretty pronounced. So back in 2015, 57% of all browsing sessions that we saw were coming from desktops, and that dropped down to 50% in 2018. Uh, Conversely, the smartphone sessions 29 went from 29% in 2015 to 44% in 2018. So a pretty large growth of, of traffic on smartphones. Interestingly, tablets have kind of waned a little bit in popularity. I think it's probably maybe not so much the physical count of tablets have reduced, but relatively smartphones have grown in popularity. So looking at the manufacturers of the smartphones, the big change here is the Motorola market share. The um, the market that Motorola was probably the strongest back in 2015 was Brazil. And at that point, they had 25% of the market. Most of that was driven by the popularity of their Moto G model, that was kind of the blockbuster phone in in Brazil for many years. But over the last 3 years, increasing competition from the likes of Samsung and LG have made the market share of Motorola drop from 25% down to 12. The Moto G is still out in the market. I think it's on its fifth generation, and it's a little later. We'll see it. But the many of the budget models for for Samsung, the J5 or the J7, or LG's likewise budget models, have really taken away some of Motorola's share. Apple, in this case, has continued to moderately grow in this area in Brazil, moving from 20% up to 22%. So let's take a look at the top smartphones. In Brazil, back in 2015, as I had mentioned, the Moto G was the phone. It held 10.4% of the market. And at that point in the first quarter of 2015, the second generation Moto G was already out, and it was at 6%. It was followed in the top 10 by the Apple iPhones S, the 5S, the 4S, and the 5, all kind of right after each other. And then a couple of Samsungs got into the act there, the S4 and the Galaxy Grand Quattro. Um, Moving to 2018, interesting change. Google Nexus 5 is actually the most popular phone with 6.8%. And the Moto G, now on its fifth generation, 5G plus, is the only Moto on the top 10 right now, and it stands at 3%. If you want to get a little more information about the Brazilian market, our MOVR report will be available by the end of the day on our website, and we will be contacting everybody who has subscribed to the list to let them know that it's there. There's a little more detail about the Brazilian market in that report. And finally, on the Brazilian side, the uh, the use of a mobile network operator by time of day. So across the bottom here, we have the hours, 24 hours in a day, and the percent of the traffic that we're seeing on a mobile network operator. Now that's as opposed to a Wi-Fi communication. Um, so what we've seen in 2015, there was pretty steady use of a mobile network, kind of right around 79%. Well, the peak time was 79% of users in the morning, but it was a pretty consistent uh, line across the day. Moving to 2018, we see that there's a lot more variation in what we're seeing in terms of use of the mobile operator. Now, this has to do with commuting issues, but also the growth of of home, business, and public Wi-Fi availability. I think what we're seeing here is that the mobile network was always relatively strong in Brazil, but alternatives with Wi-Fi availability and higher bandwidth and lower costs is becoming more prevalent.